I had a boyfriend who seemed to be playing tough to win over. Each time I planted a kiss on him, he grimaced and shoved me aside, yet his ears would flush crimson when I sneaked my hand into his. During movies, he'd withdraw slightly, but somehow our fingers would end up locked together. People said this romance was completely one-sided, but I was certain David was head over heels for me. He relished my focus, adored my affection. He simply struggled with showing it until one afternoon I delivered him water during basketball practice and his buddy mocked him. David, your demanding girlfriend showed up again. David remained silent. As he grabbed the water bottle, I suddenly caught his inner voice, so irritating I went rigid. David scowled at me. What's the matter? But his inner monologue floated into my consciousness again. Why doesn't she just go away? I gazed at him for several seconds, then tossed the water bottle I was holding into the garbage bin. Nothing, just walking past. Continue playing. The instant I spoke those words aloud, heated basketball courts seemed to plunge to Arctic temperatures. Even Marcus, standing beside David, sensed the frost. He glanced at David's grim face, then at me, and silently slipped on the shirt draped over his shoulder. I spun around and departed. My ponytail swung firmly, but I couldn't deceive myself. I feared if I remained one more moment, my tears would spill. The wind whispered through scattered leaves as I moved, replaying David's irritated look while furiously stomping on leaves beneath my feet. So, when he claimed he didn't want me watching his matches, he genuinely meant it. I continued appearing like a fool, delivering water repeatedly to him. I was merely irritating someone he wanted. Gone. After being with David for a year, this was my first time doubting whether he genuinely cared for me. The surprise of catching his inner thoughts was insignificant compared to accepting that he truly considered me irritating. Wandering in my mind, I arrived at my classroom and slumped onto my desk, feeling utterly exhausted. Then the class burst into murmurs. I glanced up to spot David entering my classroom. Wasn't he playing basketball? Or had he realized I was troubled and come to fix things? I straightened up, observing him walk closer with an elegant notebook in his grip. Note she requested yesterday. Look, he did think about me. I extended my hand to accept it, but once more caught his inner voice. So foolish. My hand stopped in midair. I stared up at David. He was striking, that distant, mesmerizing kind of handsome. His demeanor was even more aloof than his appearance. He rarely talked, but I assumed he was nearly reserved. Every time I kissed him, embraced him, or attached myself to him, he'd scowl, but his ears would redden and his pulse would quicken. I constantly believed that signified he cared for me. David was simply playing tough to win over, secretly obsessed with me, but catching 3 dismissive, cold words from his consciousness shattered my spirit. I snatched my desk partner's notes and managed to smile. Not necessary. I already got some. David frowned, appearing puzzled. He was brilliant and didn't require notes, but I struggled with particular subjects. So he began recording them for me. Each time he passed me his notes, I'd leap into his, embrace and compliment him enthusiastically. who possesses such a considerate, diligent boyfriend, David, would consistently blush to his ears, but remain quiet. Then I'd copy his tone and reply to myself, Sophie's boyfriend does. Evidently, every time he provided me notes, he was thinking I was dumb and foolish. My fingers turned pale. David stood upright before me, neither of us uttering a word. He obstinately clutched his notebook, his knuckles turning white. I gripped my desk partner's notebook, wordlessly confronting him. My desk partner glanced at me and fixed his glasses. Your boyfriend achieves higher grades than me. You ought to not. Wanting to just so foolish, once more I interrupted him. I'll simply use yours. Then I sent David away. Class is beginning shortly. You should leave. I obtain the notes I require. You don't need to record them for me anymore. The second I uttered that final sentence, I witnessed David's eyes grow darker. He compressed his lips together, set down the notebook, and exited the classroom. Did you two quarrel? My desk partner leaned closer with a cunning grin. I wanted to chuckle, but couldn't. With David's reserved personality, we couldn't even have a decent argument. You believe David cares for me? I turned to question him. The guy's eyes wavered slightly. All the girls in class claim he doesn't appear to care for you. They believe you're simply pursuing him. I'd heard this for over a year, but never minded, because in instances nobody else witnessed, David was kind to me. So kind, I assumed he simply couldn't show himself so kind. I genuinely believed he cared for me, but now, staring at that notebook next to me, I abruptly wasn't certain. I was assigned cleaning duty today, and with my sour mood, I'd cleaned a third of the classroom after forever when David materialized in the entrance. The class was already vacant. He quietly approached and grabbed the broom from my grasp. So sluggish. Another harsh thought, another tone of revulsion and irritation. I grew angry too and attempted to retrieve the broom. I'll handle it myself. He rose up and scowled at me. Witnessing the annoyance in his gaze made me feel even more miserable. Sophia, why are you troubled today? He questioned me, truly irritating. He studied his handsome features, inhaled deeply, and didn't respond. Instead, I questioned back. David, do you genuinely despise me? His frown intensified. No. Additional thoughts emerged. I didn't know if that was positive or negative. Like numerous times previously, he wordlessly retrieved milk tea from his backpack and offered it to me. Clean. The floor spotless. Then grabbed my backpack and we departed school together. We were unusually silent. The entire journey tipped quickly. I would skip around David mentioning he appeared handsome today and recounting what occurred in class. Then I'd slip my hand into his when he wasn't noticing, observing his ears redden as he grasped my hand firmer. But today I simply felt stifled. What's the matter with you? Today, David's voice emerged again. He appeared extremely frustrated, his typically detached eyes now encircled by a dark atmosphere. Nothing. After another silence, I questioned him. David is waiting for me after school. Irritating. Actually, I wanted to question more when I chased him so dramatically. Was he irritated? Holding Hands kissing, attaching to him daily. Was he irritated? David shook his head, but his thoughts frustratedly bored into my ears. So irritating. Why is she questioning? So he was irritated. I retrieved my backpack from David's shoulder and smiled with manufactured cheerfulness. Well, I'm becoming irritated too, since he wouldn't confess it. I wouldn't question anymore. The boy's body instantly tensed. He observed me quietly. You don't need to wait for me after school anymore. Simply head home early. I tapped his shoulder and turned it apart. After a lengthy moment, someone seized my wrist. David's face was ashen. He stared into my gaze. I can maintain my distance. You take your path. I'll take mine. So irritating, so repulsive. David truly was fake. Previously, I assumed he cared for me, but pretended not to. Now I understood he didn't care for me, but pretended to be concerned. I couldn't decipher him anymore. Whatever you desire. Footsteps trailed me at a distance until I nearly reached my entrance. Reflexively turned around. Previously, I would consistently plan a big kiss on David's cheek when we separated. See you tomorrow, handsome boyfriend. He'd constantly glance around, anxiously worried someone might overhear. Now I understood it was quite forceful of me. I waved and shut the door. I thought I witnessed the light in that boy's gaze extinguish instantly. The front door clicked shut, sealing out the damp autumn breeze, but it did nothing to block the sudden, heavy silence of my own home. I stood in the entryway for a long time, my fingers still resting on the cool brass of the doorknob. Outside, the sky was bruised, with twilight casting long, skeletal shadows across the wooden floor. For a year, this had been my favorite part of the day, the lingering warmth of David's hand on mine, the memory of his flushed ears, the sweet, clumsy routine of our departures. I had lived in a world of romantic projections, translating his scowls as endearments, his silence as a secret locked treasure chest to which only I held the key. But today the lock had shattered. Why doesn't she just go away? So foolish, so irritating, so repulsive. The words didn't merely echo. In my mind, they felt carved into my chest. I walked to my room, dropped my backpack onto the floor with a dull thud, and collapsed onto my bed without turning on the lights. The ceiling was a vast, dark blankness. I tried to rationalize it. Could a mind-reading ability suddenly manifest out of nowhere? It sounded like the plot of a cheap web novel, yet the sheer clarity of that inner voice, the distinct low timbre of David's voice, stripped of its usual quietness and filled with a sharp, biting irritation, was impossible to ignore. It had cut through the noise of the basketball court and the chatter of the classroom with terrifying precision, and it had matched his expressions perfectly. The scowl, the tense shoulders, the way he turned his face away. He hadn't been playing tough to get. He had been enduring me. A hot, stinging tear slipped down my temple, dampening my hair. I closed my eyes tightly, trying to block out the memory of my own laughter, my own enthusiasm. How many times had I wrapped my arms around his neck while his friends watched, thinking I was being cute while he was internally screaming in disgust? How many times had I forced him to hold my hand while his mind recoiled? You Really are a fool, Sophia, I whispered. To the empty room. The next morning, the sky was overcast, a dull, uniform gray. That mirrored the cold numbness in my chest. I dressed slowly, choosing a plain sweater instead of the bright yellow one David once briefly glanced at. I didn't tie my hair into the bouncy ponytail he supposedly liked. I let it fall loose and messy around my shoulders. When I reached the school gates, my heart did a painful flip. David was standing by the bike racks, his hands shoved deep into his pockets, his chin tucked into his collar. He looked incredibly handsome, a solitary figure against the morning mist. In the past, I would have sprinted toward him, grabbed his arm, and babbled about whatever dream I had had the night before. Today, I kept my eyes fixed on the pavement, adjusted the strap of my bag, and walked right past him. As I brushed past, I felt his gaze shift toward me. The air between us seemed to drop in temperature. Sophia? It was a faint, hesitant murmur in my mind, not the harsh, irritated voice from yesterday, but a quiet, almost startled thought. I didn't stop. I quickened my pace, entering the main building and disappearing into the crowd of students. My desk partner, Leo, was already seated. When I arrived, lazily flipping through a gaming magazine, he looked up as I slid into my seat, his eyes scanning my face. Whoa, Leo said, lowering his magazine. You look like you got run over by a truck. Did you actually study last night? No, I said, my voice flat. Just didn't sleep well. Did you and the Ice Prince finally break up? Leo asked, half joking. Before I could answer, a shadow fell over my desk. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. The subtle scent of laundry, detergent, and fresh rain always preceded him. David stood there, holding a small carton of strawberry milk, the kind I drink every single morning. He set it down on the corner of my desk without a word. I stared at the pink carton. In the past, this small gesture would have made my heart soar. I would have squealed, opened it immediately, and insisted he take a sip first. Annoying. Why is she just staring at it? The voice sliced through my thoughts, cold and sharp. My hand, which had reflexively reached toward the carton, froze. I looked up. David was staring at me, his eyes dark and unreadable, his mouth set in a hard, straight line. To anyone else, he looked perfectly calm, perhaps a little bored, but to me, his mind was screaming with irritation. I don't want it, I said. My voice was quiet, but steady. David's eyebrows twitched. He didn't move. Take it back, I said, pushing the carton toward the edge of his side. I don't like strawberry milk anymore. Leo looked back and forth between us, his mouth slightly open. Sensing the sudden tension, David's hand tightened into a fist inside his jacket pocket. He didn't reach for the milk. He just stood there, a towering, stubborn presence, staring at me as if trying to drill a hole through my skull. Stupid. So stupid. Why is she acting like this? The raw frustration in his inner voice made my stomach turn. I couldn't bear to look at him anymore. I grabbed the carton, stood up, and walked over to the trash can at the back of the classroom. With a dull plop, the milk landed inside. When I walked back to my seat, David was gone. The space where he had felt freezing cold. By lunchtime, the rumors had already begun to circulate. Did you see Sophia throw away the drink David brought her? Are they finally breaking up? I knew it. She was always clinging to him like glue. He must have finally had enough. I sat in the courtyard, hiding behind the trunk of a large maple tree, holding a half-eaten sandwich. The autumn wind was picking up, sending dry, brown leaves scraping across the concrete. Every whisper from passing students felt like a physical blow, but the worst part was that I couldn't disagree with them. They were right. I had been a nuisance, a self-deluded girl who had forced herself into the life of a boy who secretly detested her. Hey, I looked up. Marcus, David's closest friend from the basketball team, was standing there, holding a soccer ball under his arm. He looked uncharacteristically serious, his usual easygoing grin entirely absent. Can I sit? Marcus asked. I shrugged, shifting slightly to give him room on the concrete ledge. Marcus sat down, sighing as he leaned back against the tree. So, David's been playing like absolute garbage today. He missed 5 free throws in a row during practice. And then he nearly took a guy's head off. During scrimmage, he's like a ticking time bomb. I kept my eyes on my sandwich. What does that have to do with me? Sophia. Come on, Marcus said, turning to look at me. You two obviously had a massive fight. He won't say a word, but he looks like he's about to murder someone. He's been staring at his phone every 5 seconds. We didn't fight, I said quietly. We just don't have anything to say to each other anymore. You're kidding, right? You've been practically attached to his hip for a year. You don't just stop talking overnight. Maybe I just realized I was being annoying. I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Maybe I realized he never wanted me there in the first place. Marcus frowned, his brow furrowing in genuine confusion. Who told you that? David? That guy has the emotional range of a brick, but he doesn't. Before Marcus could finish, a heavy step sounded on the gravel nearby. David was standing a few yards away, his uniform slightly disheveled, his eyes fixed intensely on Marcus. The wind caught his dark hair, blowing it across his forehead. Get away from her. The voice in my head was a low, dangerous growl. I flinched, looking at David. His expression was completely blank, but the sheer malice in his internal monologue was terrifying. Why is he talking to her? What is he saying? Stupid. So stupid. She's going to listen to him. She's going to leave. I stared at David, my heart pounding in a mixture of fear and confusion. She's going to leave. Did he mean me? Was he angry because he thought Marcus was interfering? Or was he angry because he thought I was complaining to his friend? Marcus stood up, raising his hands in a placating gesture. All right, man. I'm leaving. No need to look at me like you want to bury me under the gym floor. He patted my shoulder gently. See you later, Sophia. Hang in there. As Marcus walked away, David slowly closed the distance between us. He stopped just a couple of feet away, casting a long shadow over me. Why were you talking to him? David asked. His voice was raspy, stripped of its usual cool indifference. He's my classmate. David, I can talk to whoever I want, I said, packing away my unfinished lunch. So irritating. The word struck me like a whip. I closed my eyes for a brief second, forcing the tears back. If I'm so irritating, why are you here? I asked, looking up at him, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to keep it steady. You don't want me around. You don't want me watching your games. You don't want me to give you water. You don't even want to hold my hand. So, why do you keep coming back? David's eyes widened slightly, a rare flicker of shock passing over his features. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His knuckles clenched at. His sides turned white. I don't. His internal voice was a chaotic, tangled mess, but then it settled back into that familiar, defensive coldness. Why is she questioning everything? Why can't she just be quiet? So annoying. So repulsive. I let out a soft, humorless laugh. It was a sound of complete defeat. I get it, I whispered, standing up and brushing the dust off my skirt. I finally get it. You don't have to worry anymore, David. I won't make you look foolish in front of your friends. I won't force you to pretend anymore. I walked past him. This time he didn't try to grab my wrist. He just stood there, motionless, like a statue carved from ice, as I walked out of the courtyard and back into the school building. The next few days passed in a blur of gray. I withdrew completely into myself, throwing all my energy into my schoolwork. I sat at my desk, kept my head down, and refused to look in David's direction. It was exhausting, but it was also a strange form of self-preservation. When you can hear the thoughts of the person you love, and those thoughts are filled with nothing but disdain for you every second in. Their presence is a slow, agonizing torture. I began to actively block out his voice, humming to myself or focusing intensely on the teacher's lectures whenever he was near. But you can't entirely block out someone who shares a classroom and your social circle. On Thursday afternoon, our biology teacher announced a surprise pop quiz. The classroom was immediately filled with groans and the frantic rustling of paper. Since this is a practical assessment, the teacher announced, you will work in pairs. I have already assigned the partners to save time. I prayed silently under my breath. Anyone but him. Please, anyone but him. Sophia, the teacher called out, you'll be paired with David. My heart sank into my shoes. I looked up slowly. David was already looking at me from across the room. His expression was as aloof as ever, but when our eyes met, he immediately looked down, his hand gripping his pen so tightly the plastic creaked. Don't look at me like that. The thought was sharp, almost offensive. I dragged my chair over to his desk, my movement sluggish and heavy. I didn't say a word as I sat down, pulling out my textbook and a sheet of paper. You do the data entry. I'll do the calculations, I said, keeping my voice businesslike. David didn't answer. He simply nodded and began writing. For 30 minutes, the only sound between us was the scratching of pens and the ticking of the classroom clock. It was a suffocating, tense silence. I kept my eyes strictly on the textbook, determined not to trigger any more of his internal thoughts. But then my pen ran out of ink. I scribbled frantically, on the corner of the page, but only a faint, dry groove appeared in the paper. I sighed, reaching into my pencil case, but I had forgotten to restock it. Before I could ask Leo or someone else for a pen, a sleek, black metal pen was quietly slid into my field of vision. I looked at the pen, then at David. He was already looking back at his own paper, pretending to be deeply absorbed in a diagram of a plant cell. His left ear, however, was a deep, burning crimson. So stupid. Just take it. My hand hesitated. So stupid. He was calling me stupid. Again, even while offering me a pen. Why did he have to be so cruel in his mind? While his body showed all the signs of embarrassment, I didn't touch the pen. Instead, I turned to the student sitting on my other side. Hey, can I borrow a pencil? Sure, Sophia, the boy said, handing me a wooden pencil. Thanks, I said, flashing him a small, genuine smile. Beside me, the air turned incredibly heavy. I heard the sharp snap of a pencil lead breaking. Why is she smiling at him? Stupid. So stupid. She hates me. She really hates me now. So repulsive. I am so repulsive. I froze. The pencil in my hand hovered over the paper. My mind raced, replaying the last thought I had just heard. So repulsive. I am so repulsive. I slowly turned my head to look at David. He was staring at his broken pencil, his face pale, his lower lip bitten so hard it had lost all its color. I am so repulsive. The pronoun in my rush of pain and insecurity over the past few days I had always assumed his thoughts were directed at me when he thought so irritating, when he thought so foolish, when he thought so repulsive. Had he been talking about himself? My heart began to beat in a strange, erratic rhythm. I remembered the basketball court. Why doesn't she just go away? Could he have meant, why doesn't she just go away so she doesn't have to see me fail? Or why doesn't she go away so my heart stops beating like this? I remember the notebook. So foolish. Was he calling me foolish? Or was he calling himself foolish for staying up all night to write notes for a girl who now seemed to despise him? David, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the hum of the classroom. He didn't look at me. He just grabbed a sharpener and began aggressively sharpening his pencil, his movements tense and jerky. Don't speak to me. Don't look at my ugly face. She thinks I'm annoying. I ruined it. I always ruin it. I couldn't even say a single nice thing to her. I'm so stupid. The sheer torrent of self-hatred that flooded my mind was staggering. It wasn't a cold, dismissive voice. It was a panicked, suffocating scream of absolute insecurity. It was the voice of a boy who was drowning in his own inability to communicate, desperately throwing up walls of silence to protect his fragile, terrified ego. I stared at him, my eyes wide, the realization washing over me like a wave of cold water. All this time, every time he shoved me away after a kiss, it wasn't because he was disgusted. It was because his heart was beating so fast he felt like he was going to suffocate. Every time he scowled when I held his hand, it wasn't because he hated the touch. It was because he was terrified his sweaty palms would disgust me. He wasn't playing tough to get. He was simply a boy carrying a mountain of silent, crippling anxiety, and I had interpreted His defense mechanism says hatred. The bell rang, signaling the end of the school day. The classroom emptied. Quickly, students eager to escape the suffocating heat of the building as the first drops of a heavy autumn rain began to pelt against the windows. I didn't leave. I sat at my desk packing my things with deliberate slowness. David was still at his desk too. He was staring out the window, his backpack slung over one shoulder, looking like he was waiting for the rain to stop, or perhaps waiting for me to leave first. Just go, his inner voice pleaded, sounding incredibly tired. Just go home. So, Sophia, don't look at me anymore. I can't bear to see you look at me like I'm a stranger. I zipped my bag, stood up, and walked over to his desk. He didn't move, but I could see the muscles in his jaw clench. David, I said. He slowly turned his head, his eyes meeting mine. They were filled with a profound, quiet exhaustion. The rain is really heavy, I said, pointing toward the window. Do you have an umbrella? He shook his head once. I have one, I said, pulling a small, folding blue umbrella from my back. Let's walk together. No, don't do this. Don't be nice to me. Out of pity. I'm so annoying. I'm so repulsive. I'll just make you miserable. The pain in his thoughts was so raw, it made my throat tighten. I wanted to reach out and shake him, to scream at him that he was wrong, that he was never repulsive, that I had never been miserable with him. But I couldn't explain how I knew. I had to show him. Come on, I said, grabbing his sleeve. Gently, unless you want to get soaked. He hesitated for a long, agonizing moment, then slowly stood up. We walked out of the school building in silence. The rain was coming down in sheets now, creating a gray curtain that blurred the rest of the world. I opened the blue umbrella, holding it high. It was a small umbrella, barely big enough for one person, let alone two. Get closer, I said, tugging his sleeve again. You're getting wet. David stepped closer, his shoulder brushing against mine. His body was incredibly tense, stiff as a board. Too close. She's too close. My heart, it's too loud. She's going to hear it. She's going to realize how pathetic I am. I smiled softly under the cover of the umbrella. I can already hear it. David, I thought to myself, as we walked down the familiar path toward our homes. The silence between us felt different. It was no longer the freezing, hostile silence of the past few days, but something fragile, like thin ice waiting to melt. David, I spoke up, my voice competing with the sound of the rain, drumming against the nylon fabric above us. Do you remember the first time you gave me your biology notes? He didn't answer, but his step slowed slightly. I was so happy, I continued, looking ahead at the shimmering wet pavement. I went home and copied them, word for word, into my own notebook even, though I didn't understand half of it. I just wanted to look at your handwriting. It was so neat, so precise. It made me feel like you really cared about whether I passed or failed. I did care, his mind whispered. Sudden, desperate warmth in the thought. I stayed up until 3 a.m. rewriting those pages because my first draft was too messy. I didn't want you to think I was lazy, but then I said, my voice dropping a pitch, when you handed them to me, you didn't say a single word. You just threw them on my desk and walked away. I thought you were angry at me for being bad at biology. David stopped. Walking. I stopped too, turning to look at him. The rain was dripping from the edge of the umbrella, catching the faint yellow light of a street lamp. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and dawning realization. You thought I was angry, he asked, his actual voice cracking slightly. It was the first time he had spoken more than 3 words to me in a week. Yes, I said. And when I tried to hug you to say thank you, you shoved me aside. I thought you found me irritating, repulsive even. No. The word burst from his lips, louder and more urgent than I had ever heard him speak. He took a step toward me, his hands reaching out, as if to grab my shoulders, but stopping himself just inches away, his fingers trembling in the air. No, he repeated, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. Never. I never thought that. I was terrified. His mind screamed. A chaotic flood of thoughts pouring into my consciousness. You are so bright. You smelled so good. When you hugged me, my mind went completely blank. I couldn't breathe. I thought if I didn't push you away, I would lose control and do something stupid. I'm so awkward. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be a boyfriend. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, hot against the cold. Then why didn't you say so? I asked, my voice trembling. Why did you keep it all inside? David looked down, his shoulders slumping in defeat. The rain was soaking his jacket now, but he didn't seem to care. Because I'm a coward, he whispered. I've always been like this. When I get nervous, my mind goes crazy, but my mouth just freezes. I look at you and I want to tell you how beautiful you are, how much I love having you around, but all that comes out as silence or a scowl. I hate myself for it. His inner voice added, so filled with sorrow it broke my heart. Every single day, I hate myself for making you look like the only one trying. I wanted to be better for you, but I only know how to ruin things. You didn't ruin things, I said, taking a step closer, closing the final distance between us. I reached out and took his cold, wet hand in mine. His fingers flinched, then slowly, hesitantly, they curled around mine, locking together. His grip was tight, almost desperate, as if he were afraid that if he let go, I would disappear into the rain forever. Don't let go. Please don't let go. I won't let go, I whispered. David gasped, his eyes flying to mine. He didn't understand how I had answered his unspoken plea, but in that moment, it didn't matter. The barrier of misunderstanding that had kept us apart for a year was finally crumbling. We stood under the small blue umbrella, the rain pouring around us like a protective wall, isolating us from the rest of the world. I'm sorry, David said, his voice raw. I'm sorry for being so difficult. I'm sorry for making you feel like you were alone in this. I'll do better, his mind promised. A quiet, determined resolve. I'll try so hard to speak. Just don't leave me. We'll do it together, I said, reaching up to gently brush a wet strand of hair from his forehead. You don't have to be perfect, David. You don't have to be the cool, distant boyfriend everyone thinks you are. If you're nervous, just tell me. If you're overwhelmed, just hold my hand. We don't need a lot of words. David stared at me, his eyes shining with a warmth I had never seen in them before. The cold, aloof mask he had worn for so long had completely melted away, leaving only the boy who loved me in silence. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned down. This time, he didn't grimace. He didn't turn his face away. His lips met mine in a kiss that was gentle, hesitant, and incredibly sweet. It was a kiss that didn't need any translation. It was the sound of a heart finally finding its voice. When he pulled back, his ears were, as always, a brilliant shade of crimson. But this time he didn't look away. He kept his eyes locked on mine, a small, shy smile playing on his lips. I love you, his mind whispered, clear and beautiful. And for the first time in a year, I knew with absolute certainty that he meant every single word.